Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Nick with Draftbit. I'm joined again this week by George. What's up, George?
Not much. How you doing? How's your
I'm
week?
good. Happy Friday. Yeah, it's been another week.
Another week at Draftbit.
Another week of Draftbit. All right. Well, if you're just joining us, this is our weekly office hours. In our weekly office hours, we do a couple of things. One is we talk about what's new at Draftbit. Another thing that we do is we take Q&A. So start dropping your questions, comments for us in the chat of the streaming platform of your choice. And the third thing we do is we try to just demo some elements of Draftbit, maybe do a little bit of building. Today, we're just going to kind of make a little bit of progress on an app that I started in previous week's office hours. We're going to kind of blend a demo of some of the what's new at Draftbit stuff with the build. And we just kind of keep it casual and light, maybe throw in a dad joke or two, who knows.
Both daddies here, yeah. A good audience for that.
So like I mentioned, start dropping your questions for us in the chat. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to kind of toggle over to what's new at Draftbit.
Where do we live stream, by the way? I know we on what, Periscope, and like Twitter and Facebook, YouTube.
Yes, right? Facebook and YouTube, and then also Twitter via Periscope. I don't know. I feel like I keep getting warnings from like Twitter and Periscope that soon like Periscope's going to be shut down. But like for whatever reason, we just keep being able to stream to Twitter. So I don't know. If you're on Twitter, if you're watching us on Twitter, give us a shout out. Tell the Restream folks, keep Twitter up.
Well, Colin in the comments right now is saying that he found us through Twitter, so it might be working there.
There we go. Okay. By the way, these live streams do get sort of like saved to Twitter. They get saved to Facebook. They get saved to YouTube. I would say if you're looking back through our like library of videos, trying to see, if you say to yourself like, oh, I thought these guys did this in one of the Friday office hours, definitely go to YouTube, because what I actually go in and try to do at least is, like update the video descriptions with what we actually did. Sometimes I'll try and add timestamps so you can kind of like navigate to the part of the video that you saw that you wanted to revisit. YouTube is like definitely the place where all of our video content lives in a more like permanent state. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself like scrolling our Twitter feed endlessly, or like scrolling our Facebook feed endlessly. So definitely follow us on YouTube. And the other benefit of following us on YouTube is you get access to all of our other video content. We don't just do live streams. We do tutorial videos and a bunch of other cool stuff. So just type Draftbit into YouTube and follow that page. Cool? Cool.
That sounds good.
All right. Okay, so thanks to our teammate Aman, we now actually have a weekly digest of everything that's new at Draftbit each week. So I am in community.draftbit.com, and I'm in the What's New section, and I'm on Aman's post, What's New at Draftbit. He posted this on Wednesday. So a bunch of things are new at Draftbit this week. One is that now all data-enabled components come with a new setting called initial value. I'll show you what that looks like in my app. Where's initial value? Input fields. I'm sorry, not data-enabled components. Input fields. So I can define an initial value that basically maps to basically the initial state of these input fields. And so in Aman's post, he kind of describes what this makes possible is things like this handy animation. So you click edit on something, and your input is that value is defined in the initial value of the input field, and you can just update it rather than having to retype something. So that's initial value in a nutshell. Pretty handy. Trying to think if there's anything else that, yeah, George, go ahead.
I was just going to add, it works for, as you mentioned, a lot of the inputs and controls. So think of it like if you have like checkboxes or radio buttons, switches, things like that, you can get whatever state they should be on, like should they be checked or not checked from your database, and set that as the initial value. So now you can have a more complete form that is like truly dynamic, which is a big step forward.
Yeah. I'll try and work the initial value stuff into our demo today when we start building in our app. We also have, I think I'm not sure if we wrote a broader documentation for this or not yet. Aman can check me on that if he's watching, if we have docs for all the different transforms yet. But I posted a quick demo video on our YouTube channel of how to do a really handy text transform tutorial. Basically, you get a number from your database. It's not in the right format. Well, you used to not be able to format anything coming from the server. You're just kind of stuck with whatever format it was being returned in. Now you can transform data from the server with a variety of built-in functions that Draftbit has. They look like this: parse boolean, length, negate, parse float, parse int, round down, round up. But I can also define a custom function, and I can that custom function to transform. And so this demo video that's on our YouTube channel and in our community shows how I take a number that's coming from the server for a price and format it into a sort of more user-friendly version of that number. It's really sweet. It's one line of code, so it's a low-code solution, but it really gives you a lot of fine-tooth control over how things display in your app. So definitely check that out. And if you've been building in Draftbit and you've been kind of frustrated with not being able to have that fine control over data from the server, now you can do that. Also, like kind of a significant change if you are just coming back to Draftbit this week. We now, I'll sort of like preview why we made this change. So when you come into Draftbit and you're in single screen view, which is kind of like, I call this the canvas view, but the official name for it is a single screen view. We now have, you can now basically, the outlines around all of your components are kind of permanently displayed. Now, the reason that we initially did this was because it was really confusing. Single screen view versus web preview was kind of confusing, like, hey, which screen is supposed to represent my app in the builder? And so I'm just loading up my Expo preview of this screen. And you can see, obviously, in preview mode that the outlines are not there. We originally made this change mostly because it's confusing to know which mode to be in. But what these outlines also allow me to do is really understand, like previously when I was building, I may not have known unless I was eyeballing it, like, is the gutter next to this component the same as the gutter next to this component? And now I can see with these outlines that yes, in fact, I did set up my margins and padding correctly. So these are like really useful guides for understanding spacing of things on my screen. And I really like them. And also, like, just looking at the builder, I immediately know what version or what mode of building I'm in, and it makes things super easy. So I don't know, like, let us know what you all think of these new blue outlines. I think they actually look kind of cool. Reminds me of like a blueprint, an architectural blueprint. But this should make building in Draftbit a little bit more easy and straightforward. So that's also new in Draftbit.
Yeah, I found that particularly helpful. You mentioned the padding and all, and from my experience with it, it's been really great for everything related to alignments. And I don't know, it's like there's still a way to go, but like that's one step towards like pixel perfect. You can really see specifically like what you're changing and how it's affecting everything. It's nice. It's a very nice feeling. I'm glad we pursued.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this in our announcement post, but like it used to be, if you rewind Draftbit like a year ago, 2 years ago, this screen in Draftbit was a much worse representation of what your app would look like in real preview. And it was like very obvious that like, oh, this is not my app. This is just kind of like a visual representation of my app. Like I need to actually live preview this on my device to see what it really looks like. And so like you were much more reliant on doing live preview on your actual phone because you really need to see what it actually looked like. And so, you know, again, like a year ago, 2 years ago, like I would always have my phone out right next to me as I was building in Draftbit. And like for better or for worse, the better this screen got, the more realistic it looked, the more I didn't need to rely on my phone, and the more I would rely on this screen. And then like everyone will have this oh shit moment in Draftbit where it's like, oh, I made it look great in this screen, but it looks weird in preview. So there's always going to be mismatches because, again, this is just our representation. Single screen mode is just our representation of your components. Preview mode in the browser is a web representation. So it's, you know, literally like HTML, CSS, right? Translated by Expo. And then like on your phone, whether you have iOS or Android, is the real like native preview. And so like if your goal is to build an iOS app or an Android app or both, don't forget about live preview. Like I know it's a couple of steps more to like get live preview running, but it's so easy. Like always preview your app on your phone. Don't rely on the canvas view. And hopefully we're kind of signaling that with these blue outlines now. So I don't know, you all tell us what you think.
Colin asked in the chat if it's Flexbox based or if we do things like snap to grid, snap to point. So it is Flexbox based right now. We don't do any kind of grid or snap or things like that, but it's an interesting idea. Yeah,
it definitely is. Yeah, totally Flexbox based. Which if you've been building and Draftbit for a while, like it's hard for me when I go back to like a design tool where it is more, you know, like vector drawing based. It's hard for me to like go back. So I actually find building in Draftbit much easier. Like I made this screen, like I just eyeballed it, like these things and this contents in this container. I redid this screen a little bit, and like this view has a flex of 1, this view has a flex of 1, and this view has a flex of 6. And it's like so easy for me to think about that now and just kind of like, you know, mess with like proportions of things on my screen. Like Flexbox is amazing. If you are not familiar with Flexbox in Draftbit, or you need like a little primer on Flexbox, Aman actually wrote a killer Flexbox guide that we have in the community. So just go to community, type Flexbox. It's the first result, complete guide to layout and Draftbit using React Native Flexbox. This guide is amazing. In fact, I think we cross-posted this on Medium, and this is like one of our best performing pieces of content on the internet. Flexbox is hard, but once you get it, it's so awesome. So definitely invest time in learning Flexbox. It will definitely pay off. Colin said he'd like smarter guides, especially for breakpoints and alignment. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I know what you mean, Colin, so definitely elaborate. But those things are more for like, those are more like web paradigms, aren't they? Like breakpoints and things like that. I'm not 100% sure how that translates to mobile, but I would definitely send us more info on what you're hoping to see, and we can think about it. Cool. All right, so that covers what's new in Draftbit. Keep the questions and comments coming in the chat, and we'll get to them. But for now, I'm going to jump over to, oh, sorry, last thing I meant to mention. we've been slowly making improvements to a bunch of our components with a big focus on input components. And so some of these things are still like in a transitional state. Some of the functionalities are a little bit rough, but a lot of the input components have gotten a lot better in Draftbit and will continue to do so. So what I'm going to actually be spending some time on today is showing some interesting, cool things with input components. And so that's kind of going to be the focus of our the next like 30 minutes or so here that we have to demo Draftbit.
And a quick addition on that. So we're working hard on that right now. So it's happening as we speak. So we're gonna make an announcement, and we're gonna release it all, and it's gonna be nice. In the meantime, if you want to kind of see the newest and coolest thing, feel free to like a good way to do it would be if you have a checkbox in your app, just like replace it with a new checkbox. Like remove it, put a new checkbox, and that will be a different code being generated that should have like the latest improvements. So maybe some of what you're going to see in Nick's work session or demo right now, you might not be able to do that with like old or existing checkbox. So don't worry, just add a new one if you want it now, or just wait a couple of weeks.
That's a great thing to call out. So if you all are kind of newer to office hours, this app that I've been working on is kind of like it's like a Foursquare for coffee type of app. So the idea is, you're gonna have to ignore my design skills because a lot of these screens are pretty rough. But the idea is, there's a coffees that exist in the world, and I want to sort of, as I try new ones, kind of check them into a list of my check-ins so I can see how I enjoyed certain coffees and I can revisit them and things like that. So this is a personal app for now, but at some point, maybe it will be like a multi-user authenticated app. Airtable's my back end. And so like this screen is a list of all my check-ins. Again, ignore, we were messing around with list within list last week. And I think that's why this screen looks so foobar, but I have a list of my check-ins, and then I also have a way to check in new coffees, and like see information about these coffees, check it in, provide information, blah blah blah.
So do you check in when you drink it? Is that the idea? Or you check in when you like buy it?
Yeah, I would check in when I drink it. Which like, so the idea would be, so like right now when I click check in, I have like, I don't know where I populated the UUID and tasting notes, but I would type some stuff for tasting notes. I would give it a rating, upload an image, but then like the idea and what I want to mess around with today, I'm going to duplicate this screen, maybe get rid of image because this is a custom component, is add things like, how did I brew it? Was it drip? Was it pour over? Was it cold brew? Things like that. Did I make it at home or did I buy it in a coffee shop, right? Like, I could see this app being used if I go into a coffee shop and someone makes a cup of coffee for me. I can say like, oh, what coffee was that? Okay, I'm going to check that one in. Like there's so many different ways, like methods for enjoying coffee. And I want that to be part of my check-in experience, because then I can know like, oh, I rated that coffee a 4 out of 5 on drip, but I rated it a 5 out of 5 on pour over. Like this coffee is definitely much more suited to pour overs. We lost George. Sometimes George's restream crashes. I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, sorry, I lost you there for a sec.
I don't know why your thing loves to drop, but
also it's always when we do it together, right? I don't think it did that when I did the live stream by myself. I'm wondering if it's like a multi-connection thing. Anyway,
weird.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm gonna actually do first is I'm gonna just new check-in. I think I'm just gonna Is this screen even worth? I guess I'll just duplicate this. I was gonna say like the screen's kind of garbage. Is it even worth duplicating it? But might as well just new
So you
check-in
mentioned
copy.
you're using Airtable, right, for your backend. So
Mhm.
like you don't, okay. So every time you're checking, you have a big database of all the coffee and you like to like pick one. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So this is my Airtable. Obviously, there's a bunch of dummy data in here. I think we're working on a star rating component. We don't have that yet, but you know, I can, and I don't think we have slider ready, so I'm not going to do any numerical stuff yet. But you know, like multi-select. I think we're going to try radio button group today. Like, there's a bunch of different things that we can mess around with, and so you know, like like the aim of this tutorial is to show you a bunch of different input components, how to build them in Draftbit, how to set them up to submit data to the server, uh, and or how to kind of like read their initial state back into the component and things like that. So we'll see how far we get. Again, like big caveat is that a bunch of these input components are in a transitional state. So let's just see how it goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sounds
All
good.
right. So I just duplicated this screen. I'm actually gonna delete this custom code component from my screen. That was the like photo upload, and I just don't want to kind of mess with that right now. So this is tasting notes. It would be really cool. So I'm kind of modeling this after an app called Untapped, which if you're a craft beer fan, you'll know Untapped. And something that's cool about Untapped is that they have, I may have to actually just like, all right. They basically have an interface that allows you to like select tags. Like there's like probably hundreds of flavor profiles in beer. And so the idea is that like if I type like light, then like the light little tag comes up and then I can select light and it adds that as a tag to my check-in. It's a really like slick interface. And I'm sure if I gave it some heavy thought, I could figure out a way to do that in Draftbit. But for right now, maybe I'll just leave tasting notes alone because like text input, you know, good enough for right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rating, I know we said we didn't have any numerical input, but maybe why don't we let's try a radio button group for rating, maybe. Yeah, let's see how this goes. So radio button group is a new concept in Draftbit. Basically, radio buttons on their own don't really make any sense because radio buttons really only exist in the concept of multiple options. And so the way to use radio buttons in Draftbit now is that you have this radio button group, and then maybe I'll just add a radio button row. I'll add 5 of them, I guess.
Do you know why they call radio button?
No, is this like a trivia that you're about to drop on me?
Well, they're actually the reason. I'm not just fishing. I'm not 100% sure that's true. So I was hoping maybe you could like either validate or deny. But I think I read that it's called radio button as because it comes from like the radio device or like even in your car radio when you used to have those like physical button, you'll press one and the other one will like pop back up, and then you'll press another one and all the other button will go back up. And so there's this system that you can only have one press at a time. You know what I mean? If you remember those devices, physical devices, you could not press like 2 at a time. I think that's where it comes from. Which I don't know if it's true, but even if it's not, it's a good way to remember like the behavior, the expected behavior.
Very interesting. All All right, so what I'm doing, so I've wrapped 5 radio button rows, which is basically just a radio button combined with a text label. And I'm just assigning both the label and the value to the number.
Mm-hmm.
And these are just static values. These are not data enabled values.
And as you do that, people can see as soon as you type something, there's this like transform with drop down that you mentioned a bit earlier. Like every time now you have like an input like this, we're going to pop up that transform with, which lets you run it through a built-in function or custom function. And we're going to try, that's kind of a paradigm we're going to use a lot of places in Draftbit. So every time you're dealing with data, you always have this extra ability to like customize it or format it, transform it, I should say, the way you want.
Exactly. So something kind of cool is I mentioned like we have this initial value now. So like this is useful for having like a default value. So I just set it to 5, and maybe you noticed as I was doing this, as soon as I provided a data value of 5 for this final radio button row component, I had already had this default value of 5 set, and so now it's automatically toggled. And so let me just give you a really quick preview of how radio button groups work now.
How cool is that?
It's
That's
super
pretty
cool.
awesome. In
It
like
just
2
works.
clicks. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, like, if I make a selection in the radio button group, you can only have one selected, right? Like that's how radio buttons work. And so whatever value I select, it's going to unselect the one that was previously selected.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really as simple as that. So maybe I'll just spend a little bit of, so let me get rid of this rating. What did I name this rating, by the way? Coffee rating. I got a red screen because now I have 2 components with the same field name. If I delete that, it should go away. Cool. And now maybe I'll just, I probably need to wrap this in a view so that I can do a little bit of light formatting. Maybe I want this max width to be like 200.
So yeah, you can customize a lot of those radio button. I was playing with it the other day, and you can even replace the icon itself. So I had, what did I use? Yeah, we have like built-in icon libraries in Draftbit, and so you can do stuff like the little notification icon and have one with the little check mark on one without it. And so you know, depending on what the content is, the thing you're trying to like check or not, like you can have your custom icon, which in some cases provide like a very nice user experience.
Yeah.
You can go very far.
I didn't do this, but like this would be kind of interesting. I wouldn't do this with the radio button row, but I may. I can provide a direction. So I could do something like this. I could provide a direction, turn off this max width on the view, something like that. I mean, that looks super ugly, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah, it's not too bad. For like 2 clicks.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah. So that's rating.
Talking just one last, sorry to interrupt, one last thing about customization. Like as you said, you're using a radio button group, a radio button row, which is a combination of a label and a radio button. If you want to, and if you want to have more kind of way to customize it, you can do it yourself. You can add a text for the label, you can add a radio button, put that in a view, and essentially reproduce that radio button row. We just offer that component to make it easier, because most of the time when you have a radio button, you're going to have a label with it. So we're trying to save you some time, but feel free, like everybody should feel free to like break it down themselves and do like crazy stuff with it.
Yeah, I'll just like demo that real quick. So maybe I'll just delete. This would be kind of a fun.
I see. I see you using your keyboard to delete stuff. For people who don't know, you can delete, you can undo. We have this like undo or deleted components and deleted screen, so you can really go back and forth, which is pretty convenient.
Keyboard shortcuts. I can Control Z and bring that component back that I deleted, and then delete it again. How do I? Is there a way for me to like? Oh, I can. Yes. Is this valid? Can I put a view inside of a radio button group?
You can put a view, and inside that view, put like a label and the radio button itself. Yeah, either way.
So I could like, I'll explain what I'm trying to do as I'm doing this, but I want to kind of have the radio button spaced out across the screen. So I would do flex direction horizontal, space evenly. This should work. Space between. No. Space around.
You might. Do you want to try the number of column in the config stuff? Would that help?
Can you?
We don't have that for this component.
I don't think for view.
Got it. You're right.
How would I do that? Let's see. Maybe I need like maybe my view needs to have a flex one. Yeah, there we go. That was it. Sweet. And then I want to give it some padding. We'll give it like 8 and 8. Okay,
so what is it you're trying to do?
So what I was going to try and do is just put a second view underneath the this radio button group, and to put the data labels. So you could basically have data labels underneath instead of going across.
Oh, I see.
This may be silly, but so we'll give this view a flex one, and then also give it padding, the same padding that we gave the other view, and give it space around. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. George, are your girls home today?
Can you hear them? I was just thinking about that. They're being a little noisy in the background. Sorry.
I mean, they're kids.
It's rainy today in Cambridge, so girls are inside and making some noise, as kids do.
As kids do. Okay, so I mean, I think this actually worked pretty good. At least this is the general idea, right?
Yeah. You know what's fascinating to see you do that? I would not have thought of putting that into 2 views like that, separated. I would have thought of doing like a view, like 5 views with in each one the button and the label like on top of each other. But so I'm saying that like genuinely, like it's nice to see how other people approach the same design challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if I was going to be super precise about it, like what I would probably do is put each of these text components inside an individual view and give each of the views a flex one. Because if you can see, like, this is just the perfectionist in me, but like, I think the width of the text individually, like 1 is narrower than 2. So these things get like a little bit cockeyed, but it's pretty good. Like it's like pretty close.
Yeah.
Let me just give this a little bit of bottom margin. and maybe make it, I don't know, I need some of your like, design sense to tell me how I should improve these, but like, there we go. All right, so that's a radio button group. And I just need to give these things values of 1. Again, these are not radio button rows, so they don't have labels, but they still do have numeric values that we need to set. And then I'm going to set the default for this to 5, which is already set. It's called coffee rating. Cool. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking at this and saying this needs a...
So yeah, when we have a star rating component, you'll be able to like just dump that in. But
Yeah.
it's cool to be able to like assemble it like you did, like block by like basic component per basic component like that.
Yeah. All right. So what else could I put in here? I could probably have like a how's our drop down input component looking these days?
The picker. You can try the picker. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one.
So maybe I want to do picker solid.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, I need a text component above it.
Yeah, so picker is like a drop down, or like you select if you come from like HTML. It is very similar behavior. You're going to give it a bunch of options, and then you're going to give it an initial value, and that initial value is going to be selected when you load the app.
The screen's starting to look a little bit haggard, but that's okay. So I'm going to call this brew method. And
so for the picker, we also have the option to provide a label. So you see there's a little bit of like white space on top of the actual box. So you can put a label there. We are actually like in little inside knowledge. We're considering providing a component that's a little like even more like low level than this, and there's like a drop down without the label for people who don't want a label. But for now, that's the best way to go about it.
Sweet. And so my array of options, I need to live on the server somewhere.
So you can, so yes, it is correct. It can be dynamic data that you retrieve from your Firebase, Airtable, whatever. It can be static. So you can actually try it right now. Like if you put, if you make an array, sorry, the square bracket and like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and square bracket. It's a little small. I'm not seeing very well, but yeah, if you put text, you're gonna have to put that into that quote.
Ah, duh. Also known as strings.
Right, so they create a custom value for it, and now when you preview,
looks good.
Wait, so we don't see it on the live stream because I think you're sharing the screen, and the pop-up is typically like a layer on top of the screen. But I'm just letting people know that I assume you saw like the pop-up thing, right?
Yes. Okay. That's kind of funny. I don't actually know how to overcome that in this live stream, but let me show you what it looks like on my live preview on my phone.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, so I've got my tasting notes, my rating, and then when I select I can't get tasting. I think give me 1 second. I think my tasting notes input field has like a autofocus turned on. Yeah. Okay, there we go. I don't know why it does that, but okay. So when I go and select from the picker now, and I get the
nice.
native, right? Like,
yeah, pour over, drip, cold brew, nice.
I select one and hit. Sorry, I'm doing this back. This is really hard to do backwards,
through the video.
Close.
Yeah,
and now it's selected.
nice.
Sweet.
So you can. There's a few things going on which are really cool. You can already select an initial value, so you don't have to have that like select a value text. You can already put. You might have to share your screen again. We lost your screen here, but you can put an initial value and say like it's a cold brew right away by default. I don't know why would you want necessarily to do that, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. So I'll go here, picker solid, and maybe I want my initial value to be drip. Whoops.
Right, any one of those options. Exactly. So now we can even see it on your screen. It's already there. And additionally, as we kind of mentioned before, that not only the option, but also the initial value can all be like dynamic data. So you can get that all from your backend. If you want if you want to specify the default in your backend, you can do that there. And last note, because our engineer Donald worked a lot on that and did some cool stuff there, I want to mention it. For people who have like more sophisticated needs, the list of options can also be an array of dictionaries that have a value and a label. So like if you, I come from the web, so I'm thinking of that in terms of like a select element, but like you will have what you see on the screen, and then you can have the value that you're going to send, you're going to use. And those can be different things. You can, if you do like a language drop down, the language can be like US English. And then the value can be the specific like locale string like en-us. So, because one is more human readable. So you might want to dissociate those two. Like I said, it's a little bit more sophisticated use case. But so that option input here in Draftbit lets you put an array of a dictionary of like a label with a label key and a value key. And that should work essentially the same, but just the user will see whatever label you provided, and then you'll be able to use that value to like submit that data. Does that make sense?
So what's the syntax? Like how would I type this in here?
So it would be a square bracket, curly bracket, and then there will be two key in there. The first one will be value. It will be as a string, so you want that to be like in quotes. So the first one is going to be value, and you can say, actually, let's do the English language. Let's do en-us. I'm just thinking of, yeah, exactly. You got it. And then comma, and you'll have another one that will be label. Exactly. And then this one can be like, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And then close the curly bracket, close the square bracket. Okay, we're doing it live. I hope that's the right syntax. I haven't done it in a few days. So those are options. Right, you remove the initial value because, yeah, that makes no sense in this context. So now if you preview that, if that doesn't work, I'm going to go and double check the value, the format. Maybe I missed it. Oh, here it is. English. All right. So you got the right label, and from a code point of view, you're going to get the value you want. How sweet is that?
It's interesting that it defaulted to the value when I selected the label. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but it
defaulted. Oh, that's a good point. That should probably be the label. Yeah.
Instead of the, yeah, that makes sense. But that works. So I have a question for you. Can I do, so let's say I have in my Airtable, let's say I have a new field for brew method, and it's a single select, and I have cold brew, drip.
We're not seeing your screen, by the way. I don't know if that's.
Oh, whoops! I'm sorry.
It's okay. Sorry. I didn't know that was a purpose.
Pour over. Espresso, latte, whatever. All right, so I have all these different brew methods. What's that?
No, I was gonna make a bad joke. I'm gonna say this one.
Is latte brew method? Is that where you're gonna be
I was gonna trigger you by saying like, "That's an espresso. Don't you spell that with an X?" But it was too much. I don't want to get you too.
Wow.
Too far. I'm pushing it too
far. So let's say that I wanted. So hypothetically, let's say that brew method, like someone invents a new way of brewing coffee and like this list grows over time. Like I don't want these values hard coded into the front end as options. I want I want the front end to always be getting its options, ever expanding list of options from the server. Is that possible?
Yes, you might have to change a couple of like the way. Maybe I'm not thinking of a more obvious way, but the way I directly came to mind is that if you do another table in Airtable for all your methods, and you essentially have a record for each of them, and then this field, the one you're on right now, instead of being a single select, it'll just be a link to another table, right? A link to a record.
Okay.
And because if you do that, then you're able to get the whole list of options, the whole list of methods from Airtable, and put that as your like options in Draftbit in your dropdown, and then let the user pick the one they want and save it here. And the reason, like when you use a single select like that, at least I don't know on top of my head of a way to get the list of all the potential options from Airtable. So it's almost more of a Airtable. It's not a limitation. That kind of makes sense by design. I get it. But I don't know if you can get that whole list. If people do, by the way, like maybe I just missed it or never used it, so I could be wrong. But
I think I remember. So this was like a limitation. Basically, when you're fetching like a list from the server, do you remember how sometimes we weren't picking up certain fields, like if they were empty in the first result of the fetch? So now I think we traverse like the first 10 results of a fetch to try and discover all the possible options. So like maybe that would work if within the first 10 check-ins, there's always these 5 options already in existence, chosen as values. Or maybe not.
We do that to understand the schema. So we will look at the first 10 results to know that you have a brew method field, but we don't really do anything with the actual value that you put in there. You know what I mean? We look at 10 fields to make sure there is a value, so we can then know, okay, that's a legit column. We're going to put that in a schema, but we don't really do anything with that value. So I know what you mean. I don't think that we will be able to like do it that way.
Okay. So for now, I think what I would just do is have my 5 values that I put in here. Hope to not make any spelling mistakes because that gets frustrating.
Yeah.
And so those are my options for the dropdown. And so now when you can't see them in the preview, but I have my 5 options when I select the dropdown. And so that's pretty useful. So now I can submit any of these values to this field in Airtable. Just because we're coming up against our time here, I probably won't go all the way to like creating more fields and submit. But my next steps would be on the screen, obviously have a button for submit. And yeah, that would be me, and I would attach obviously a post action to this button, and then navigate to my list of check-ins, and I would see my new check-in there, and that's super sweet.
Yeah. Do you have a way to, or do you envision letting people edit the check-in at all, or is it kind of like once you're done, like once you submitted it, you're moving on?
We do have that. Again, like ignoring the appropriateness of the design of the screen, I do have edit check-in. I think it does work. I've got the values pre-populated, so I can change this rating from 4 to 5, update, navigate, and now it's 5 out of 5 instead of 4 out of 5.
Got it.
Change it back. I do have some of that stuff, and that works great.
So the reason I asked, which is, it's awesome, and I apologize for the crying in the background, but the reason I ask is not today, probably we're out of time, but it might be cool in that edit check-in to also use, like once we have it, the star rating, but maybe the radio button group in a way that is pre-populated by the data you have in the backend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe a cool way to demo how we like inject data into the form.
Yes. So, anyway. So I mentioned, this was back when we didn't have all these great new input components, but so this data, right now, I believe I'm pre-populating this data from I'm gonna probably get this wrong, but let me just check. So its initial value is coming from the server, but I could have also passed these values in via navigation parameters, I believe. I'm trying to think if that's right or not. Yeah. So I do have some initial value stuff going on, but like taking that a step further with this new screen that we built, I can inject, like the values into radio button groups and drop downs and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna, once I am like super happy with all of the information that I'm submitting in this check-in, then I'll probably go back through my app and edit all of the update check-in stuff to match this, because it's really, this has like come a really long way, and I'm super happy about it.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Well, let me just check the stream real quick and see if anyone has questions. Colin, thanks for following along today. Anyone else has questions for us, reach out to us on the community. So that's community.draftbit.com. And yeah, want to thank everyone for joining us today. George, thank you for joining me today. And we will catch you all next week. Take care, everyone.